The first time I watched Code Geass, I watched the first season with subtitles. I just read through the subtitles of the first season. And the second season I watched in English. The second time I watched it, I did the exact same thing. I read through the entire first season, hitting space a lot, and then I watched the second season in English. Later times I just watch it in English, but this anime is like the most Shakespearean thing to be put to TV at all. I mean, I've seen Hamlet 1994, and it is a great movie. But in terms of everything that embodies Shakespeare, I mean, it's just side to side to 1994 Hamlet, but it's just. In any case, a Geass is a sort of a vow which, if left unbroken, will help the person with the Geass in some way. If someone breaks the Geass, then that person is really gonna get destroyed. It just, there are moral tales about getting a Geass and breaking some of the vows of the Geass and then being left with the choice of, do I break the rest of the vows or do I not break the rest of the vows? Because it'd be either way, they find themselves at a point where they can either break more vows or break more vows. It's just as soon as someone breaks a vow, just stuff starts happening. And this is actually pretty close to what happens in Code Geass, the series. Whenever Lelouch tries to tilt the interpretation of his promise or vaguely ignore his promise, it just bend his promise, it just hits him. It's like a, it's like every episode there seems to be some sort of plot shift that specifically comes as a push against Lelouch every time he does something that is not specifically in line with the Geass promise. So, if you haven't watched this series, I'm just telling you now, you have to watch this series before you hear me go on about how Geass works in Code Geass, because I cannot talk about Geass without mentioning Code Geass. It's like talking about giant ice walls without mentioning Game of Thrones. It's pointless. Okay, so if you have watched this series, stay on. If you haven't, you're not gonna get anything I say. Code Geass starts off with Lelouch v. Britannia. The half-breed son of the king of the nation, the Empire of Britannia. uh, living inside a sort of place of luxury, but also exile within the borders of the subjugated nation of Japan, now called Area 11. We get a little bit of exposition, but mostly every scene I see where it's the first scene of a character, they basically state their entire plot motivation when they arrive, and it's done in a way that just makes sense in line with the story, and it just goes on and on and on. So, what happens? Lelouch tries to help out a truck that's crushed, that's made a rapid turn and stopped off the road, and it has to then go on because it's a truck on the run from the Britannian forces. So Lelouch goes up to help the people in the truck because he sees a bunch of people watching that truck and being like idiots and not doing anything and being the most annoying type of entitled you could possibly be as a member of a crowd who's not just, I mean, so he goes there because he thinks someone should do something, and he ends up falling inside of the truck as the truck goes on. Then the truck gets cornered by Britannian forces, it gets shot up, and Lelouch ends up meeting his old friend Suzaku. Lelouch and Suzaku know each other because Suzaku used to be the son of the president of the nation of Japan, and they basically walked through a field of corpses when they were young, carrying Lelouch's younger sister. So Lelouch tries to meet his friend all of a sudden, like destiny, and the package which the freedom fighters from the truck thought was some sort of weapon that the Britannians were using opens up, and it's a woman. So a bunch of bad guys from Britannia show up. They berate Suzaku for not killing Lelouch because they think he's in league with the terrorists, and they have this strict rule of rapidly murdering terrorists for no reason, even though they could yield valuable information because royal nonsense and whatever. So they knock Suzaku out. Actually, they shoot him, I think, and then an explosion gives Lelouch time to get away. Now, when he gets away, he runs through the area where the forces of the prince in charge of Area 11, Japan, where the truck is. It's an isolated ghetto, and the prince thought, well, if my father finds out I've been doing immortality research, he's going to be mad, so I better slaughter this entire ghetto of Japanese people because reasons. And Lelouch hears a scream of a little girl, and immediately after that, he gets a phone call. because something had to attract the attention of the guys looking for Lelouch. So this green-haired woman who actually got shot in the face bestows on Lelouch the power of the Geas. She takes a bullet for Lelouch, saying he mustn't die. And as she falls to her death, she gives Lelouch the Geas. She asks him for a quick moment, "Do you want the power to stop this?" And he wants the power to stop this, and he accepts this Geas. Immediately after that, he basically orders all of them to kill themselves. And it works. He's like a vampire. He orders people to kill themselves. And they do kill themselves. He then continues on to personally lead a massive retaliation against the royal forces. He expertly gives everyone weapons, gives everyone what are called nightmares, which basically feeds into this British Empire your sort of a vibe to the show. Basically, large robots that shoot at each other, and he just beats up a lot of his enemies. And at some point, Suzaku wakes up, and he doesn't know that his crown prince has ordered everyone to slaughter civilians. He thinks, well, those guys who tried to kill me are assholes, but I still have to stick with the system because reasons. And he doesn't know that he's fighting for forces that are actively slaughtering people, so he gets into a special nightmare because reasons, and he goes after the terrorists, the people he thinks are terrorists, because he thinks all the terrorists are terrorists, and, well, yeah, the system sucks, but it doesn't suck that badly. And Lelouch ends up going to the Crown Prince and ordering him to tell all forces to stop shooting at people. Now, this saves all the people in that ghetto because that is what Lelouch asked for. Only it's not what Lelouch asked for. Lelouch asked for the power to change the world. And by doing so, he also tied himself to the goal of changing the world. So the entire story revolves around that decision. Now, I've been going on and on about what's been happening in the first episode. A lot of you know what's happened at the first episode, but if anyone hasn't seen the rest, this is the point where you stop listening. Okay, so look at Lelouch's decisions throughout the course of his journey. First, he decides, well, they're going to execute Suzaku. I don't like that, so he puts on a facade and goes up to this crowd of soldiers and orders them to release Suzaku, and then uses his Geas. Doing that, he becomes a symbol. He uses the actuality to hide the fact that he hypnotized, Geasified his enemy. in this situation. After he frees Suzaku, Suzaku immediately rejects Lelouch's symbol of rebellion, the zero mask, the zero identity. He knows it sucks, but he figures, well, the system sucks, but I have to go and be part of the system because reasons. I'm really dumbing him down. Everyone hates on Suzaku, but it's not as he is. If you follow along the logic of everything he has seen and everything he hasn't seen, he's not that dumb, but he's just an oblivious moron most of the time. But he's not that much of an oblivious moron if you trace all his decisions, all his information availability. So, Lelouch saves Suzaku, Suzaku goes away. Lelouch then takes his symbol of rebellion and starts using it to do something, build up resources. Next, he ends up getting a personal reason to stop bad guys, who are an extremist version of these freedom fighters. The the guys from the tower. So he looks at a news broadcast at his friends in uniform are talking about what's going on, what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. And Lelouch decides to turn his push for them to go save his sister and his friends into a theatrical statement. He convinces them to follow him as knights, and he invents the knight identity as a sort of noble statement to the world. He only did that because his friends were in danger. We don't know what he would have done if his friends weren't in danger. His friends being in danger pushes him to do something. So he goes out, he goes after these guys who took over that tower, and he declares himself a knight. The thing is, knights need something, knights representing chivalry. Chivalry wasn't what you might call perfect. It was the sort of system of rules just to manage the habits of just to manage people, not to let them make a mess. Something for powerful people to secure their powerful control over the world. Knights were rarely truly chivalrous in terms of the modern idea of chivalry. Chivalry was basically, if you see a maiden walking alone, you cannot attack her. But if you see a maiden with a knight, you can attack the knight and then take her for your own, or the exact opposite. I can't remember where it was. If you see a maiden walking alone, you can rape her. If you see a knight guarding a maiden, you can't rape her. There's just this bizarre system of rules that have nothing to do with justice whatsoever. So the knight identity is itself historically, in terms of historical accurate context, a symbol of someone rich wanting to do something, and it just manages them not to go too far. It's just so it doesn't make trouble for the rich people. So there's a sort of vanity to the idea of knightliness, but because people have a romanticized idea of knights, Lelouch declaring himself and his people knights is this sort of romanticized idea of war. As soon as he makes this romanticized concept of this noble goal to protect people and do whatever, it just builds into this Zero Requiem mask. The Zero Requiem doesn't really become the Zero Requiem until after a very long journey of Lelouch making massive mistakes. So Lelouch does what he does to save people he likes, right? He stops people who are a problem, he saves people who he likes. But then, by using that to declaring himself a knight and to virtualize, I don't know if that is a real word, virtualize, to push this virtue idea on his reputation, if he really starts to actually believe that, or if it's just a lie, immediately after he gets hit with the reality of war. The problem of the reality of war is no matter how virtuous you think you are, you're always gonna do something that's terrible and fucked up. So he does this thing where he says he's gonna be all virtuous, but then by defending people he considers useful for his goal, he slaughters an entire your town full of people with an avalanche. And it hits extra hard because his girlfriend lost her father in that avalanche. So by crushing the mountain, he defended people he considered useful, but it's not because he didn't protect them because he wanted to protect them, because he believed in them. He just saved them because they were useful to him. And that really pushed him. His next choice is to embrace the guilt, to embrace the guilt of being an asshole who murders people. So he murders an entire boat full of people in secret, maintaining this delusion of virtue among his men. This, however, leads to his girlfriend discovering his secret and saving him and aiming a gun at him, but then deciding not to shoot him. Because he's an idiot who feels guilt about his girlfriend father getting killed. And she's not actually his girlfriend, but he's basically like his girlfriend. Because he's such an idiot, the Geas uses that guilt to save him. No matter how stupid he is, he gets a wake-up call, whether he does something because he overindulges in the good of his ideas, or he does something to overindulge in the bad of his ideas. He constantly gets this push of destiny that leads him on his path. And it's like a trace. You can trace his decisions and how the Geas accurately works within his world. When Lelouch decides to go and take the offer from his sister's offer. No, actually, first off, Suzaku. When Lelouch decides he should leave his sister in the care of Suzaku, he gets a wake-up call where Suzaku suddenly gets promoted to his other sister's personal defender. Lelouch realizes Suzaku cannot possibly be the protector of his sister, and he decides not to kill him, and he immediately lets his selfishness order his men not to give him this victory he needs. His sister is irrelevant to the Geas at this point. His sister is a product, is the reason why he took the Geas, but it's not the Geas' reason for existing. The Geas wants to remake the world. As a result of Lelouch denying his men this victory, and you see them getting tricked by this order, and when they see the reinforcement and so on, Lelouch ends up getting Suzaku getting almost killed by Suzaku. The Geas, however, is his way of stopping Suzaku. Lelouch uses the Geas to order Suzaku to live and save him. There is a teleportation. Suzaku gets hit hard, but so does Lelouch, because his decision of mercy for Suzaku led to his near death at Suzaku's at Suzaku's hands. So people are about to kill Lelouch, and Suzaku is supposed to keep him there, and stuff happens. So after that, Lelouch meets his sister, his other sister Euphemia, and they talk, and Lelouch gets this immediate upgrade after reconnecting with his sister Euphemia. He gets this immediate upgrade handed to him with the keys in the ignition, this giant weapon. So, as a result of Lelouch getting this giant weapon, he follows the Geas in terms of his planning. He plans to have his sister shoot him so that the rebellion can invade, repel the Britannian forces. But because he's connected to his sister, she convinces him not to do that, not to have her shoot him. He decides then to reject the Geas and to simply settle for the special zone. That's when his Geas, that is the exact moment when his Geas flares up. Lelouch rejects the ultimate goal of the Geas and orders his sister, and the Geas basically uses his words to order his sister to do the thing he wanted. His sister ends up giving him what he wanted, but she does this in the most disgusting way possible, where she murders she murders a lot of Japanese and she gets shot up. The massacre prevented in the first episode loops back around and hits Lelouch and just disimbalances what the Geas basically takes what it has given to Lelouch. And quite literally, someone else with his own Geas takes the Geas away from Lelouch. Lelouch, as a result of losing the Geas, ends up in a situation where he's about to die at the hands of special forces. They're after him in the pilot of the second season. Then there's a repetition for the green-haired witch decides to give him his power again. She asks him if he wants to embrace the Geas, and this time he actually does embrace the Geas. Everything the Geas gave to him was taken away along with itself. Now Lelouch makes a repeated vow to this Geas, has a second Geas. This Geas leads to the entire story of the second season, and Lelouch ends up fully fulfilling his goal. But the journey to the first season is an excellent example of what the Geas is and what the Geas does. In the second season, you might be mad because Lelouch killed himself at the end. Now, the third season retcons this because he doesn't actually die. But Lelouch, whether he died or not, the public death of Lelouch the Britannia, the Emperor of Britannia, united the world. Everything leading up to that ending was Lelouch lying and lying and lying and lying. Except for Riddle, he wasn't really lying about wanting to kill Riddle. When Riddle saves him and self-sacrifices himself, Lelouch actually changes his mind. I wholeheartedly believe that self-sacrifice of Riddle led to Lelouch giving up his hate, giving up his anger, and demanding that Riddle lets him go. Lelouch lied to Suzaku about what happened at the end of season 1, what happened with Princess Euphemia, because his guilt led him not to embrace his innocence in that moment. He was innocent of killing his sister, but he feels so guilty about killing his sister, but about the Geas killing his sister, about his actions leading up to the death of his sister, that he just forces the blame on himself. Because he lied to Suzaku, Suzaku continues to be mad at Lelouch, and his own words led to the knights hating on Lelouch. His empire, his goal of uniting the world, because he gets shut out of this League of Nations, Lelouch ends up going to Britannia and going through the whole journey with his parents and whatever, and it leads to his final conquest of the world, his final gathering up of the world, his final ending. Lelouch's guilt led him to embrace that moment where his own forces were about to kill him, but because the Geas is still in effect, the Geas led Rivel to sacrifice himself, saving Lelouch. Because Rivel self-sacrificed, Lelouch's emotional relationship to Rivel rapidly shifted. It was a 180. He didn't just rapidly lie. It was the major turning point in his decision-making process that led to the ultimate goal. Lelouch was about to embrace death because of his guilt, but the Geas wouldn't let him. So it forced him to change his mind by letting him see something truly good in someone he truly hated because of what happened with his girlfriend. Rivel's death completely flipping his emotions, leading to his ultimate goal. I know a lot of people hate that moment, but for me, it's just the ultimate conclusion of Lelouch's struggle with the Geas, the ultimate shift that led him to fulfilling his Geas. It's not nominally, it's Rivel that led him to fully embrace his Geas and finish everything. Up to that moment, Lelouch was chained by his guilt. Because of that moment, when Rivel died, he gave up his anger and he stopped letting the guilt weigh him down. Follow the series in its entirety and you will notice that the Geas, as it is in mythology, is perfectly represented in the decision-making process of Lelouch v. Britannia. Okay? That's it.